50 days, no arrests, no answers, no body. For the first time since her 84-year-old mother, Nancy Guthrie, was ripped from her Arizona home in the dead of night, Savannah Guthrie is breaking her silence in an emotional, high-stakes sit-down. This isn't just a news update. It is a raw, investigative look into a mystery that has baffled the FBI and left a family in agony. If you are new to the True Crime Report, subscribe now to join our deep dive into the cases that demand justice, because today, the silence ends, and the search for Nancy Guthrie enters a volatile new chapter. The atmosphere in the Tucson desert is usually one of serene, rugged beauty. But for Savannah Guthrie, that landscape has become a haunting reminder of what was lost. In her first comprehensive interview since the February 1st abduction, the veteran journalist traded her role as the interviewer for the interviewee, sitting across from her longtime colleague, Hoda Kotb. This wasn't a polished media appearance. It was an evidentiary download. Savannah revealed chilling new specifics that paint a far more violent and calculated picture than authorities initially suggested. We now know that Nancy was taken in her pajamas, barefoot, and without the life-saving medication she requires for a severe back condition and a heart pacemaker. The detail about her being barefoot is particularly haunting to investigators and forensic analysts. The terrain surrounding the Guthrie home is a jagged mix of decorative stone, cactus needles, and sun-baked earth. An 84-year-old woman with significant mobility issues, someone Savannah notes could barely walk to the mailbox on a good day, would not have been able to navigate that terrain under her own power. This confirms a grim reality. Nancy was either dragged or carried. Savannah's description of the back doors being propped open adds a new layer to the timeline. It suggests a multi-point breach of the home, implying that the perpetrator didn't just stumble upon an entry point, but actively managed the home's exits to facilitate a quick removal. Legal experts and former FBI agents watching this case closely point to the propped open doors as a sign of tactical familiarity. If you are kidnapping a high-profile target's mother, you don't want to be fumbling with a heavy sliding glass door while carrying a victim. Propping the doors indicates the kidnapper may have been inside the home longer than the doorbell camera footage suggests, prepping the environment for a seamless exit. It moves the needle from a crime of opportunity toward a sophisticated, pre-planned operation. Perhaps the most gut-wrenching moment of the entire breakdown was Savannah's admission of survivor's guilt. In a voice cracked with emotion, she addressed the elephant in the room. Was her mother targeted specifically because of Savannah's fame and perceived wealth? It's too much to bear to think that I brought this to her bedside, she whispered. This isn't just a daughter's grief. It's a central pillar of the criminal profiling in this case. High-profile media figures in the United States often face stalking and threats, but the abduction of a family member for ransom is a rare, terrifying escalation that harks back to the dark eras of the Lindbergh kidnapping. Her brother, Cameron Guthrie, a former military fighter pilot with a background in intelligence, reportedly recognized the situation for what it was almost instantly. While Savannah struggled with the disbelief of the moment, Cameron's training kicked in. He saw the disabled cameras, the propped doors, and the absence of a wander-off scenario, and concluded this was a targeted ransom plot. This professional assessment from within the family likely guided the initial 48 hours of the investigation, which saw a massive surge of over 400 federal and local agents descending on Pima County. However, the ransom element of this case has become a hall of mirrors. Savannah confirmed that while dozens of fake notes flooded in from opportunists and scammers, the family believes two specific communications were legitimate. This is a critical pivot. If the family and the FBI believe two notes were real, it means there is a digital or physical paper trail that the public hasn't seen. It means the porch pirate in the mask wasn't just a lone wolf acting on impulse. He was part of a communication chain. But as we hit day 54, the silence from the captors is deafening. In the world of professional kidnapping, silence usually points to one of two things: the plan fell apart, or the commodity, in this case a frail elderly woman, is no longer viable. As the investigation stretches into its second month, the quote-unquote atrophy of the case is becoming a point of contention. Investigative journalist Ashley Banfield and others have noted that the 400-person quote-unquote army of investigators has shrunk to a skeleton crew task force of maybe a dozen individuals. This is the natural, albeit cold, order of law enforcement. In a country with rising crime rates and limited tax dollars, agencies cannot keep hundreds of agents on a single, quote-unquote, cold lead indefinitely. But for the Guthrie family, this drawdown feels like a secondary abandonment. Adding fuel to the fire is the mounting political scandal surrounding Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. Reports have surfaced of a no-confidence vote from his own deputies and allegations of a shady history involving multiple suspensions in his past career in El Paso, information that was allegedly suppressed. When the man leading the hunt for your mother is facing a recall and internal mutiny, the credibility of the entire search is called into question. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell noted that the initial processing of the crime scene might have been botched or at least hurried. The yellow tape came down remarkably fast, and the FBI wasn't brought in to do a full ERT, evidence response team sweep, until days later. The discrepancy over the, quote, blood spatter also remains a haunting focal point. Sources suggest blood droplets found on the front porch tiles are mirrored inside the foyer. If Nancy was taken out the back, why is the blood in the front? This suggests a struggle that moved through the house or a calculated misdirection. Was she brought to the front door specifically to be, quote, shown to the camera, or was that the site of the primary assault? Savannah's interview didn't just give us her feelings. It gave us the roadmap of a botched or highly complex crime that the American public is now being asked to help solve through a $1.2 million reward. The forensic timeline of that night, January 31st into the early hours of February 1st, is a puzzle where the pieces don't just fail to fit, they seem to belong to different boxes entirely. We know Nancy was dropped off by her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, at approximately 9:50 p.m. By 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera was manually disconnected by a masked, gloved individual. But then at 2:28 a.m., a detail emerged that changed the entire scope of the investigation. Nancy's pacemaker app indicated the device had been disconnected from her phone. Think about the implications of that 41-minute gap. In that window, a high-stakes struggle occurred. For a pacemaker to lose its sync with a mobile device, it typically means either the distance between the two became too great, or there was a catastrophic electronic interference. Or, more chillingly, a physical removal of the phone while the victim was being subdued. This isn't just movement detected. This is a biometric ping of a life in transition. Expert criminologists like Ann Burgess, the inspiration for Mindhunter, point out that this wasn't a standard burglary. Burglars don't typically take hostages. They flee if they encounter a resident. The presence of a 25-liter hiker backpack on the suspect suggests he came prepared to carry supplies, perhaps for a long journey or to manage a victim's needs. But the lack of medication found at the scene means Nancy was taken without the very things keeping her heart beating and her pain managed. In the eyes of profilers, this moves the motive away from a simple quick buck and towards something darker: revenge, a fixation, or a tactical operation where the asset was more important than the person. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, led by Chris Nanos, has found itself in the crosshairs of a public relations nightmare that is beginning to overshadow the search itself. While Savannah Guthrie is pleading for her mother's life on national television, the man responsible for finding her is fighting for his political survival. A formal recall effort has been launched, requiring 120,000 signatures, fueled by deputies who claim they have no confidence in his leadership. The criticism isn't just internal. Discrepancies have emerged in the sheriff's own professional history. Allegations that he was suspended 8 times during a previous stint in El Paso, a fact that was reportedly missing from his Pima County resume. In a high-profile kidnapping where every second counts, having the lead investigator under fire for his own credibility is a disaster. It raises the question, were critical leads missed because of a top-down failure? Manos recently dismissed concerns about letting the crime scene go too early as silly. But for the Guthrie family, there is nothing silly about it. There was a period early on where the family home was released, the yellow tape was removed, and then, as if realizing the gravity of the situation, investigators surged back in. This start-stop forensic approach is often a death knell for delicate DNA evidence. When you add the fact that evidence was reportedly sent to a lab in Florida rather than the state-of-the-art FBI lab in Quantico, the optics of the investigation become as murky as the Tucson desert at midnight. In the middle of this chaos, we have to look at the human cost. The emotional anchor of this story. Savannah Guthrie isn't just a face on a screen. She is a daughter who has already lived through a profound loss. In 1988, her father, Charles, died suddenly when Savannah was just 16. Her mother, Nancy, was the shining light who pulled the family out of that darkness. Now, as Savannah sits in the Today studio, she is looking at the same chair where her mother once sat for a birthday tribute. But this time, the seat is empty. I wake up every night in the middle of the night, Savannah told Hoda, her voice breaking, and in the darkness, I imagine her terror. This is the reality of the not knowing. For a family of deep faith, the uncertainty is a unique form of torture. Savannah described hearing a voice during prayer telling her, "You do know where she is. She's with me." For many Americans, this spiritual resolve is the only thing keeping the story from becoming a total tragedy. It's a moment of profound vulnerability that transcends news. It's a daughter trying to reconcile her public strength with her private shattering. But faith doesn't provide a location. While the family finds comfort in spiritual terms, the investigative reality is grim. Former Pima County officials like Rick Castigar have openly shared a chilling theory that Nancy may have already passed away. The theory suggests that if the kidnapping was a ransom plot, the perpetrators likely realized early on that an 84-year-old without her heart medication is a liability they couldn't manage. If she died shortly after being taken, the commodity they hoped to trade for millions in Bitcoin became a piece of evidence that could lead to a life sentence for felony murder. This would explain why the ransom demands, which initially asked for up to $6 million, suddenly went silent. The Mexico connection remains the great unanswered question of this case. Tucson is less than 70 miles from the border. Investigative theories suggest that a white van seen in the neighborhood may have been part of a tactical extraction route heading south. The logic is simple. In Mexico, the heat of the FBI and the national media is dampened. You can harbor a victim in remote areas where the Pima County Sheriff has no jurisdiction. However, authorities have been quick to push back on this, claiming there is no concrete evidence of a cross-border movement. But as we've seen in cases like the 2023 Matamoros kidnappings, the border is porous for those who know how to navigate it. If Nancy was taken to Mexico to deal with her medical issues, as some analysts suggest, it implies a level of organization that goes far beyond a local porch pirate. It implies a network. As we look at the backpack the suspect was carrying, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, it tells us he was prepared for a trek. It wasn't a grab and go with a grocery bag. He had equipment. He had a plan. And while the FBI continues to sift through thousands of tips, the most haunting possibility is that the person who did this is still watching. They are watching Savannah's interviews. They are watching the reward climb to $1.2 million. And they are waiting to see if the Pima County mutiny or the FBI drawdown will finally give them the cover they need to disappear forever. The focus of this investigation has recently shifted from the doorstep of the Guthrie home to a much more calculated stalking theory. We have learned that investigators are now intensely focused on a nearby vacant property that may have served as a, quote, surveillance hub for weeks leading up to the abduction. Retired SWAT commanders and FBI analysts suggest this wasn't a crime of passion or a random home invasion. It was a, quote, meticulously orchestrated kidnapping. The theory is chilling. The perpetrator likely used the vacant home to study Nancy's routine, identify her vulnerabilities like her limited mobility, and determine the exact moments she was left alone. There is even a possibility that hidden surveillance devices were installed around the property. This matches a trial run spotted on January 11th, 3 weeks before Nancy vanished, where a masked individual was seen scouting the home. In the world of high-stakes crime, this is known as a practice visit. It shows a suspect who is comfortable in the neighborhood, someone who didn't fear the quiet streets of the Catalina foothills. If this holds true, it means the kidnapper didn't just find an unlocked door. They waited for the one night they knew they wouldn't be interrupted. While the FBI and local police search for the man with the Ozark Trail backpack, a second, more painful battle is being fought on the digital front. Savannah Guthrie used her interview to directly address the cruel and irresponsible speculation that has plagued her family since day one. In the vacuum of official information, the internet did what it does best. It invented a villain. Accusations were hurled at Nancy's son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, and even whispered about her own children. It piles pain upon pain, Savannah said, her composure momentarily breaking. There are no words I'll never understand. Sheriff Chris Nanos has since taken the rare step of explicitly clearing the entire family, labeling them as victims, plain and simple. But in the court of public opinion, the damage of a conspiracy theory is hard to undo. This phenomenon, the trial by TikTok, has become a secondary trauma for the Guthries. It forces them to defend their love for their matriarch while simultaneously begging for her life. It's a reminder that in 2026, a high-profile tragedy isn't just a police matter. It's a content cycle, and the victims are often the ones paying the highest price for the clicks. As we move into the 8th week, the technical data from that night is being re-examined with a, quote, forensic audit mindset. We've discussed the 1:47 a.m. camera disconnect and the 2:28 a.m. pacemaker failure. But new analysis from the FBI's Operational Technology Division has added a haunting detail. The suspect is described as a male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10", with an average build and a distinct black mustache visible beneath his mask. He wasn't just tampering with the camera. He was using specialized knowledge to disable the system's heartbeat. This level of technical proficiency suggests a suspect with a background in security, telecommunications, or even law enforcement. It explains why a massive search involving, quote, several hundred detectives and thousands of tips has yielded 0 arrests. He knows how to avoid the digital dragnet. He knows that a $1 million reward, the largest currently offered in a private U.S. kidnapping case, will bring out the, quote, tipsters. So he has likely gone, quote, dark, cutting off all communication since those initial 2 ransom notes. The FBI has processed over 13,000 tips, but as one investigator candidly admitted, we ain't got of it the break we need. This isn't for a lack of trying. It's because they are up against someone who understands the, quote, game as well as they do. The most enduring image of this entire ordeal remains Savannah's emotional anchor moment, the memory of her father's death. She recalled coming home at 16 to find her mother and sister praying on the couch, the moment her childhood ended. My mom taught me how to survive the unimaginable, she said. Now, 38 years later, she is using those same lessons of decide and do to lead her family through a second, more public nightmare. But there is a darker psychological toll at play here. Analysts point to the Stockholm Syndrome, or the commodity value of high-profile victims. If Nancy is still alive, she is being held by someone who views her not as a person, but as a leverage point against a national news icon. The fame that Savannah spent decades building has become a double-edged sword. It provided the platform to launch a national search, but it may have also provided the motive for the crime. As Savannah returns to the Today Show set, she will be doing so with the knowledge that millions of people are watching her, including, quite possibly, the person who holds her mother's life in their hands. The final frontier of this case lies in the quote-unquote unverified leads that keep the task force working through the night. There is the Rio Rico traffic stop, a man detained 60 miles south of Tucson near the border, only to be released hours later. There is the quote-unquote gray glove found 2 miles from the home, which initially sparked a frenzy of DNA testing, only to be traced back to a local restaurant worker. These quote-unquote false dawns are part of every major investigation. But in the Guthrie case, they feel like a cruel pattern. We are now looking at a $1.2 million reward, $1 million from the family and an additional $200,000 from federal and local partners. This is life-changing money, yet the silence remains unbroken. It suggests that the accomplices, if there are any, are either terrified or deeply loyal to the primary suspect. Retired detectives believe this was a 2 to 4 person job. The logistics are too much for one person, says former homicide detective Kurt Dabb. You need a driver, a scout, and someone to hold the victim. If this is a team, the crack in the case will come from the weakest link, the person who decides that $1.2 million is worth more than their loyalty to a kidnapper. Until then, the desert keeps its secrets, and the Guthrie family remains in a state of suspended grief. In the end, the story of Nancy Guthrie is a stark reminder of the vulnerability we all share, regardless of fame or status. It is the story of an 84-year-old woman who just wanted to watch her church service, and a daughter who refuses to let the world forget her name. Savannah's final plea wasn't just to the kidnappers, it was to us. She needs to come home now, she said. It is an appeal to the conscience of a community and the vigilance of a nation. If you have any information, no matter how small, a car parked where it shouldn't be, a neighbor with a new sudden interest in Bitcoin, or a sighting of that Ozark Trail backpack, call 1-800-CALL-FBI. Your tip could be the one that turns "we ain't got nothing" into "we found her." Thank you for joining us for this investigative breakdown. If this video helped you understand the gravity of the Guthrie case, please share it. The more eyes we have on this, the smaller the world becomes for those who took her. I am Sandra. This is the True Crime Report. Thank you for watching.